Greetings. All right, let's continue with our writing journey. So the next issue or implanted error on the SAT is syntax. And, you know, it's like word choice, basically. What word is the most appropriate in this sentence? So let's start with number one. We start right off with a syntax question. And we will read the whole sentence, of course. Given these solutions, as well as the many health benefits of the food, the advantages of Greek yogurt outdo the potential drawbacks of its production. All right, now you can approach this question a few ways. You can just look at the answer choices and read all of them in, and it's good to read all of them in. I mean, out loud. Let's go to the second half of that sentence. The advantages of Greek yogurt outdo the potential drawbacks of its production. All right, if it's obvious to you that that doesn't work, you cross it out. If you're not sure, you leave it in and you go to B. The advantages of Greek yogurt defeat the potential drawbacks. That's not appropriate. It's just not defeat. But if you look at all the answers, they all sort of mean the same, right? Defeat, outperform, outweigh, outdo. They're all very similar. But when you read it in the context of that sentence, only one's going to really make sense. Okay, the advantages of Greek yogurt outperform the potential drawbacks. And again, you decide. Outperform, maybe. The advantages outweigh the drawbacks. I like that one. And, you know, question like this, it's kind of like you either know it or you don't. Outweigh is the answer. It makes the most sense. But if you pick another one because it sounds right to you, there's not a lot you can do about it. I don't have any special tip because this is a one-off question. Like, you're never going to see those particular words all grouped together like that again. It's a one-shot deal. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. You know it or you don't know it. All right, let's move on to number 10. And we have not looked at this question yet. And if you notice, when you go to number 10, you see it starts at the top, right in the middle of a sentence. So we have to go back a page, and so that we get the full context. And again, this ends up being kind of a long sentence. All right. Also, because it is more concentrated, Greek yogurt contains slightly more protein per serving, thereby helping people stay blank for longer periods of time. Now I have to say, most people don't know what this word is, which is why I said blank. And it's perfectly fine for you to say blank and plug in your own word. All right, so let's try it that way. You don't have to do it this way. This is one method. So it says Greek yogurt contains more protein, so it helps people stay blank for longer periods of time. It sounds like they're saying full. So that's what I would say is they're full, their stomachs are full. If you can't come up with your own word, just plug in all the answers into the question. Those are your two methods. And it doesn't matter which one you do. I think it's a slightly stronger method if you can come up with your own word, right? But don't worry about it. It's still completely possible to get the answer right if you're just plugging in the answers. So full. If you don't know what that first word means, just leave it in. Fulfilled, and you think to yourself, does fulfilled mean full? And, you know, it's kind of funny. A lot of students pick this question because it's a sucker. Sorry, pick this answer. It's a total sucker answer because full and fulfilled, it just, you know, it's just a word association. But fulfilled doesn't mean your stomach is full. It means that it's more like a heart thing, right? I feel so fulfilled now that I've achieved this goal or whatever. So that's a sucker answer. B is wrong. Now, complacent, if you don't know complacent, you have to leave it in and move on. And sufficient doesn't really mean full. I feel so sufficient today after Thanksgiving dinner. No. Okay, so now we're left with two words we don't know. Uh-oh. But not really. If that's the case, Just pick one, move on. If you don't know it, don't waste any time trying to figure it out, right? If you don't know a word, thinking about it is not going to make you know it. The answer is satiated. It's the word that's already in the sentence. And again here, if you don't know it, it's a guess, but you've got a 50-50 shot. So that's as good as it gets without actually knowing the answer. All right, so let's move on. We'll go to 33. All right, so a number of pages ahead. Okay, so we read from the beginning. Even those of us who work in disparate fields are able to share advice and help each other brainstorm. That sounds fine to me. I'm going to just look at all the other answers and see what they say. Even those of us who work in disparate fields are able to give some wisdom and help each other brainstorm. Now here I would ask myself, well, which do I like better, A or B? Share advice, give some wisdom. I don't know. I mean, I think they're both decent, but I think I like A a little better. Give some wisdom is one way. Share advice is both ways. Okay. Even those of us who work in disparate fields are able to proclaim our opinions. I don't think it's about proclaiming. It just sounds very like, here is my opinion. And I don't think that's the vibe that's going on. It's more of a sharing, caring kind of thing. All right, and D, I don't even know what it means. Opine, I can't do anything with that because I've never heard that word. So I would just pick A. Now, if you happen to know the word opine, great. Then you would say, no, that's not it. But I'm not even going to talk about the word because this is not a vocabulary test. Sure, sometimes there are vocabulary words, and if you don't know them, you can get into a little bit of trouble. But I don't tell any of my students to study vocabulary for this test because it's not a vocabulary test. You'll see it. How would you know what words to study? Total waste of time. So don't do that. Don't start reading the dictionary or something. It's not that important. It's not going to help you get a better score. So let's see. There's one more, number 35. Okay, this is a good one. Because if you look at all the answers to 35, they're very similar. They're just worded in a slightly different way. So we read the sentence. It says, I'll read it as is, but more pragmatically, the discipline encourages students to analyze complex material, question conventional beliefs, and express thoughts in a concise manner. Okay, so it's either, and I'm just going to read these out loud, but more pragmatically, but speaking in a more pragmatic way, but speaking in a way more pragmatically, or in a more pragmatic speaking way. All right, I hate D. Can we just cross out D? In a more pragmatic speaking way. That's just so awkward. All right, I'm just going to cut to the chase here and tell you. Here's a tip. Take note. When it's a syntax question, so this rule does not apply to every single question in the writing. But when it's a syntax question, when they're saying the same exact thing, but you have to figure out the best way to say it, on the SAT, pick the shortest answer. That's how it goes. Now make sure you're not applying that to any other kinds of questions, right? More pragmatically, boom, I see that. Like right away, if I know this rule, I look at this answer, or these answers, and I say, already I'm tending to pick A because it's the shortest. Now you can just glance through B, C, and D and see, is anyone better than A? Right? Cut your time in half, at least. It just really makes it go faster. So short and sweet is what you want here. Okay. One other thing with syntax, I just want to do a little lesson on then versus than. Okay? So really short, then is kind of a timing thing. Like, first I went to the store, comma, then I went running. So first I did this, then I did this. It's a chronological word. okay, in time. Than, T-H-A-N, is a comparison word. This is more fluffy than that. Okay, so know those. You will definitely be tested on those. So absolutely know those. Okay, now let's go on to, I have two other lessons I want to teach you today. Let's go on to the verbs. All right, now when you have a verb that's underlined, they're going to be testing you for one of two things. One is tense, and the other is subject-verb agreement. So let's look at tense first. And I think there's just one question on tense in this test. That should be enough. Number 18. Okay, this is that sentence we were on before, but this is just the second half of it. I think I'm just going to read the second half of the sentence because it's so long. And that's a terrible thing to say. It's not because it's so long. It's that we don't really need the first half. The first half is a sentence, a complete sentence within itself. And the second half is like its own thought. Okay, that's the real reason. All right, now I'm going to read it with the correction. All right, so in 17, we corrected it to letter C. So I'm going to read it with C. Some of which drifted over Greenland in giant plumes of smoke and then fell as particles onto the ice sheet. Now, when I look at the answers, I see we have fell, we have falls, will fall, and had fallen. These are all tenses, right? They're all different tenses. That's how I know, okay, I have to look through the sentence and see what tense are we in. So you look to the answers to tell you how to think. All right, so if I go to the beginning again of the second half, some of which drifted. Drifted is in the past tense. That's good. And I'm going to look to see if there are any other verbs. Some of it drifted over Greenland in giant plumes of smoke and then fell. So I want the past tense. Drifted is the only tense, or the only, verb. So I'm going to use that as my clue. So fell is actually also in past tense. So I'm just going to leave it as fell. Fall, excuse me, B is falls. That's present tense. C is future tense, right? And had fallen, I'll say one thing about had fallen. I like to think of any verb with had, H-A-D, as the past of the past. So it's like two steps in the past, okay? You might want to take a note on that. All right, so that is verb tense. That's the first thing. Now the second thing they could be testing you on is subject-verb agreement. So if we go to question 30, yeah, question 30 actually has two things that you can see in the answers. It has who versus whom. We'll go over that next. But I want to look for now at use versus uses, right? Because that's the subject-verb thing. Now, subject-verb means, does the verb have an S or not? Which infers that the subject is either singular or plural. So that's what we're thinking about when we're thinking about subject-verb agreement. So we go to the beginning of the sentence. The article goes on to suggest that the most valuable resources provided by co-working spaces are actually the people whom use them. Okay, forget about the whom and the who. All right, we're just looking at the use. Is it use or is it uses? Because those are our choices in the answers. Well, we have to hook up the verb with the subject that goes with it. Who is using the co-working spaces? And we look into the answers and we see people, right? It's just people, right? Now, so is it people use or people uses them? I think everybody would agree. This is people use them. It sounds funny to say people uses them, right? And I want to teach you a little rule, actually. It's called the 1S rule. So when you have a verb and a subject that goes with that verb, only one of them gets an S. So if you have a sentence that says, the dog barks, we have a singular dog and a bark with an S on it. Only one gets the S. Now, if you make the subject have the S, so it says the dogs, then the verb is bark. Get it? The 1S rule. It's really helpful. So the people, no, people doesn't have an S on it, literally, but it is plural. So that's the exception to the rule, or the nuance about this. If you have a plural noun or subject, the verb does not get the S. And if you have a singular subject, the verb does get the S. All right, now last thing, let's talk about who versus whom. A lot of people use whom incorrectly because they think it sounds, I don't know, more sophisticated or something, but that's not the criteria by which you should be using the word. All right, it's kind of simple. Who is either the subject of the sentence, like who is calling, or who are you? Or it refers to the subject. My 5th grade teacher, who was my absolute favorite, retired this year, right? So who refers to the teacher, which is the subject. Okay, now whom goes with a preposition. Now remember, preposition are those little words. To whom are you referring? At whom are you directing that comment? Right? So whom, you can either remember it this way. Whom goes with a little word, a little preposition, or it's the other thing. It's not the subject. So if the whom doesn't refer to a subject or is not the subject of a sentence, then you use whom. If it is, then you use who. Okay, so that's all I think I want to do for this video. All right, I'll see you next time.